listening to the Astral Hour. I'm your host, Astral Meadow. Join me as we take a glimpse into the mysterious. Welcome, everyone. Today I'm joined by Starla Yilmas, a gifted reader and creative spirit. Starla has been reading tarot for over 20 years, offering insight and guidance through her deep connection with the cards. Beyond tarot, she's also been a passionate cross-stitcher for even longer, weaving artistry and patience into her work. She's an accomplished writer as well, with numerous short publications to her name, and she's a two-time winner of the published Maggie Award for Excellence for her romantic fiction. Starla lives with her family in Georgia, where her love for storytelling, symbolism, and creativity all beautifully intertwine. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I am really excited and honored to be here with you.
Yes, I'm really excited for this conversation because I connected with your work immediately and just wanted to learn more about you. And so I'm like, this is going to be like me nerding out a little bit, and everyone else gets to just appreciate what comes forward. So thank you so much for your time and for coming on. So to get started, could you tell us just a little bit about yourself? What first drew you to tarot and creative expression?
So, kind of two separate answers there. What first drew me to creative expression? It was the summer between fourth and fifth grade, and I was visiting my grandparents, and my grandma, she was a big cross stitcher. Every year, she cross stitched this huge train picture for my dad. And that summer, she taught me how to cross stitch. And so she got me a couple cross stitch kits, and she and I just were cross stitching together. So I've always just kind of associated cross stitch, with that calming, feminine energy as well. And so anytime like I've gone through something really challenging in my life, I always had cross stitch there to kind of help guide me through it. Um, as far as what drew me to tarot, that was when I was a teenager and I started, questioning my Christian upbringing and exploring different religious options. And I went into my first metaphysical store and I saw this tarot deck. And I didn't buy it at first because I was really hesitant because, it's like I'd been brought up that tarot is bad and evil and all that sort of stuff. But I could not get this deck out of my head. And every time I went there, the deck was just sitting there on the shelf. And finally, I just bought it. And I used that deck for quite a long time before I bought another deck. And I guess that's going to segue into what brought me to kind of marry the two, the cross stitch and my artistic expression in tarot. Um, and as cheesy as it sounds, I had a vision. I was just scrolling through Facebook and I saw some kind of advertisement for something about tarot, and then it just was like boom in my head. I could see just this giant tapestry, and it was butterflies, and I was like, absolutely not. That is a lot of work. Like I at the time, I was just strictly a writer. I hadn't stepped into that, visual artistic side of myself. So I was like, I'm a writer. I have no business trying to design a tarot deck because I'm not an artist. But similar to that first tarot deck I saw, the vision just wouldn't leave me alone. And I had several writing things kind of lined up and they all exploded. And at the same time, I was going through this intense healing phase in my life. And I just kind of woke up one day and I was just looking around at all this rubble that was my life, basically. And there, this butterflies cross stitch tarot was. It was just like, okay, so is now the right time? And so I was like, okay, fine. I will follow the vision and see where it takes me.
That's so beautiful. I love how it starts out sometimes with this. You see the vision, but you were not quite ready to embody it yet. And I feel like butterfly wisdom is such a beautiful symbol for that because they go through this process. It's not like instant they turn into a butterfly. There's this whole metamorphosis involved and there's time and there's like deconstruction. I feel like that's kind of symbolic for like, I'm not ready yet, but I will be. I'll respond when I'm, out of my cocoon phase. Yeah, and there's been a lot of people lately that I've met just out and about that are really connected to butterflies. Like I had this one woman in this meditation group, and she's like switched her whole life around to go like save monarch butterflies. And I have some friends that are just like they're buying all this milkweed, and it's just the
That's a
butterflies have been coming forward in the collective, I feel like lately.
yes, and I 100% support everyone going out and buying a bunch of milkweed. We need
Yes.
to
Sprinkle those seeds around like like glitter.
just go around your city and just spread milkweed everywhere.
Yeah. I love this. So, something I'm going to ask you because I have considered making an oracle deck myself for flower essences, but I've just been like you, like, this just seems like a lot. So, what is some advice that you have for someone who might want to create their own tarot or oracle deck? What are some of the steps that you went through?
So I think for me, the biggest thing was breaking it down into smaller chunks.
Mm,
Um, so I wasn't necessarily designing all 78 cards. I was just designing the major arcana. So, and then to even break it down further, I was only designing that one card.
mm,
Obviously, at a certain point, it's just like, okay, there's no turning back now. I have 12 of these things, right? I can't. Um, but I think just being like, because 78 is a lot, a whole oral,
hmm
like it's a big project. And so chunking really helped me as well. And then for my process, I focused on one card at a time. So it was like I kind of forgot the rest. And so it's like I would do the guidebook and I would do the design and the stitching all at the same time.
okay.
So I know some people sometimes they'll like do all the artwork or they'll write the guidebook, but for me it was super helpful just to one card at a time.
That's really good advice because I think I overwhelmed myself jumping and trying to do the whole guidebook first. And then, like, sometimes I would get the pictures, but then I got overwhelmed and I'm like, I don't want to do this because I felt like my mind was getting stretched too many different directions. So, yeah, pacing ourselves and, you know, making it not overwhelming. That's something I actually really struggle with. So, that's good advice.
And
Um,
so like, I mean Oracle deck is trickier because oracles, you are like building the system and everything on your own. But I found tarot actually easier because a lot of it was already there. Like the structure was in place, the number of cards was in place, the suits was there, even the base meanings were already there. I just so it that meant there was less work for me to do basically in this project. So I guess, cheat as well.
right. Yeah, I really love your art and the way it's shining through because I have noticed the more I am going into places and seeing some of the new decks, they're absolutely being made by AI. And
Yes.
so I love that I can look at your art and know that it's made by a human hand. And there's this beautiful simplicity to it, this beautiful humanness to it. It's just really appreciated at this time where we're just getting bombarded with so many decks now. And I don't even know if people are really putting a lot of time and
Right.
conscious effort into what does this mean for me? Because I feel like as the artist, you're kind of unfolding with the process, like with these projects that we pour ourselves into. It is about what we're trying to create, but we're kind of creating ourselves too. And like if we rush that and we just push ourselves through to get to the end and we don't pause, like you're saying, look at it one card at a time. What does this mean for me? Like how might this be interpreted for others? And I think it's that slow and steady pace that embroidery or cross stitching almost just forces us. It's
Right.
not fast.
No, this took me 21 months.
Right.
And so I started working on this project, and then about 6 months into the process, AI art came out.
Right. Yeah.
And I I had at that point made the decision to try and publish this. And I was like, how am I going to compete with AI art where someone can pump out a deck in a day?
Right.
Whereas it took me, though, as I said, the whole process took 21 months, but it was like, if everything went perfectly smoothly, there was no problems, no hiccups. It took me a week to do a card.
Right.
And I'm just like, so someone's already made how many decks in the time it makes me to do one card? How can I compete with this? But when I got the call from my publisher, Red Feather, Mind, Body, Spirit, they actually said that one reason they wanted to publish my deck was because it was not that AI stuff. They're like, it
Hmm.
stands out so much. And they had been flooded with AI decks, and they were like, we are sick of seeing the same thing. So when your deck came through, it was like just this breath of fresh air.
Yes, absolutely. And I'm a person that has all sorts of different kinds of decks and I have been really pacing myself. Like I'm only buying the ones that really speak to me that aren't looking like this, you know? And it's just like kind of the art's just kind of creepy, you know? Like it doesn't feel it's missing some kind of beauty and essence to it. And it's just to me I can feel it without even opening the guidebook or anything. It's just like even the cover.
Right.
Um, and yours just immediately spoke to me. So I definitely appreciate how much time and devotion you had to answering this call. And it's quite beautiful. Um, so how do you incorporate cross stitch into some of your other magical and artistic practices? And do you see cross stitch as a form of like ritual or creative spell work?
So I think cross stitch absolutely can be a form of ritual and creative spell work. I don't think everything I cross stitch is necessarily magical. Like right now, a friend of mine wanted me to. She asked if I could cross stitch her My Melody and Kuromi character,
Hmm.
and so that's fun. But it's like I definitely have made, obviously these butterflies and my altar pieces, and, even like I have some pendulum mats that I'm working on designing and stuff like that. I think what makes cross stitch and embroidery especially powerful for magical working is the amount of time it takes. And when you are sitting there pulling the needle through the thread, it's taking focus, and you can, with every stitch, you can weave in that intention.
Hmm.
And so at the end of it, you have spent, like, if you do just a regular ritual, you spent 2 or 3 hours focusing the intention for that spell. But with embroidery or cross stitch, you literally have weeks worth of intention woven into the fabric for that spell. And so for me, I find it can be, very powerful. It is time consuming, but, if I'm going to be cross stitching anyways, I may as well just add in a little bit of extra intention as I'm going through it.
Yeah, I do a lot of Sailor Moon and Pokemon embroidery. And it's like I also do like a lot of Egyptian deities and stuff like that, but to me, they're all just as beautiful, you know?
Yeah,
And it is kind of just proving to myself that I can stay focused on things, you know? I'm like kind of my attention it goes all over the place, but there's something about when I sit down and work on a piece, and even if I only have 5 minutes one day, and some days I might work for 2 hours, but when it's done and I look at it, I'm like, wow, like I can do hard things.
I did it. And that's honestly part of why cross stitch has helped me through those mentally challenging times, because it was like, even at my lowest,
Hmm.
look up at my wall and say, well, at least I can make pretty things.
Yes.
So I'm not that terrible of a person because
Yeah, I really see it as like a form of alchemy in a lot of ways because like I might be going through this hardship, but I can see the result of this beautiful labor of love and it's I both most of my art is all colorful and beautiful because I try not to like if I'm sad, the last thing I want to do is like paint something sad. Now some people that's like how they express it, but when I see this colorful rainbow like Hello Kitty thing, I'm like, oh my God, like I was sad, but this is beautiful, you know? Like my inner child is so happy that I did this instead of some self-destructive behavior. So,
Really?
yeah. What was there a particular card within the deck that you found particularly more challenging than some of the others to design or interpret?
The Five of Swords, which of course it would be the Five of Swords, right? Um, so what was so frustrating about the Five of Swords was I had a concept, the initial sketch, great. I drew up the pattern, beautiful. I stitched it and it was awful. And so I had to undo all of the stitches. And then I did it again and I hated it and undid it again. So the design you see is actually the third one, and it took me a month. And as I said earlier, typically it was a week a card, and this one took a month. So it was awful. And huge gratitude and blessings to my family for being patient with me while during that month, because I was so frustrated and stressed out about this freaking card that, you when someone is really frustrated and stressed, they're not the nicest and most fun person to be around. So huge gratitude to my family for putting up with me.
Yeah, it's interesting that swords would be the most challenging because that's just to me the most challenging suit anyways, like to process because of the mental aspect of it. So it's funny that it's like I'm going to challenge you in this creative process as well. So that's kind of telling for just swords in general.
I know, that's why I was like, of course it would be the Five of Swords that would give me the most problems.
Right, that's almost like the comic relief you need to just keep restarting. So, yeah, people don't understand when they see the end result of something, how many mistakes that someone might have had to work through to get that beautiful ending and just the process of it. And I know my family, specifically my husband, like I do not like to backtrack. Like I don't want to take stitches out. I don't.
Oh,
Like if I get in a knot where like I have to, and I just retie the thread and now I'm in a knot, I'm like, like this is so frustrating. But that's also part of the process. And it's like it's almost like when people say yoga, like off the mat, like I'm dealing with all this stuff within this creative expression. And it's like when I'm in a impatient place, like my work reflects that too. And I'm just
yeah.
like, of course it's testing me right now.
So there are a couple mistakes that made it into the printed cards. The oh, is it the Knight of Swords? It might be the Knight of Swords. But I have this like geometric shat pattern in all the Knight cards, but in the Knight of Swords, I actually made a mistake, and I didn't notice it until I was like 3 or 4 hours later. And I was like, in order to get there, like to backtrack that far, I was like, so I'd have to undo 3 or 4 hours worth of work, fix these two tiny little back stitches,
Mhm.
and then and I was just like, no, I'm sorry. I'm just gonna live with it. No one's gonna notice. And if they do notice these two little back stitches, then it could be like, well, that's just evidence that a person did it. So
Right, that's your humanness coming through. That's cool. I sometimes appreciate like seeing those little mistakes and like being able to weave them into the creative process. And sometimes what feels like a mistake makes it cooler later. Like I'll
yeah.
never forget the Lord of the Rings embroidery that I did and the freaking pen that's supposed to be heat erasable somehow started to reappear. And I was like, oh my God. And I was like, I had already spent like weeks on this piece, okay? This like Rohan thing. And I had to like extend the border out more. And then I added like watercolor to try to like smooth it in because it looked awful. And it made it look like a tattered flag.
Oh,
But I was
oh
like, had I
wow.
not messed, well, and it wasn't even like, it wasn't my mistake. It was just something that I did not expect. And I had heard about it, in the groups, like people like, be careful with those temperature sensitive pins. And I just like disregarded it. And then I was with this piece, my original sketch, I used the iron because I messed it up. So I like instead of like starting fresh, I just erased it with the iron. And then like 2 or 3 weeks later, I could see my original wrong sketch. But it did turn out better, but man, did I like have a whole mental breakdown over that.
It's like, yeah, the process of getting there, you're just like, I guess it was worth it, but surely it could have been an easier ride, universe.
Yeah. But now when I look back on that piece, I grew as an artist because it taught me, to use other mediums too, like weaving in the watercolor and then doing like layers of watercolor and then adding like some gray to make it. I don't know. I learned a lot about how the mediums work together, but I was terrified. I was like, if I add water now, is the thread gonna bleed everywhere? Like, is this? But
All
I just trusted the process.
Yeah, that is definitely like I have seen people who, because it's like at the end of it, you do have to wash it because you get all your oil, the oils from your fingertips and everything. And then it's just
Hmm.
like that's why I like to use DMC threads because I know DMC is
Hmm.
like not going to have any problems, but I have seen people's embroidery just absolutely ruined because of the
Yeah.
thread. And it's
Yeah.
like I feel for them. Like,
Right. It's like only another artist could understand what 5 months and then just like it looks like someone bled out on it.
yeah.
So it's painful. It kind of makes me think of the Buddhist monks that spend all this time like with the sand drawings, they're
Oh
spending
yeah.
like weeks and then they're just like it's like this lesson of non-attachment and I don't know if that's my spiritual path because I'm like I can't function. Like I don't want to just like burn my art right after I'm done with it.
Right. I understand where they're coming from, but also that doesn't, I know everything is impermanent, but that mean I get to destroy my work. Like,
Right. But that's the test, I guess. Sometimes it's like out of your hands or whatever. But and then it's like, do you start over? Like, would are you so devoted to the end result that you would be willing to even begin again? And sometimes that's a big no for me. Sometimes I'm like, actually, I think I learned the lesson. I'm gonna do something different now. So,
I think it depends on the project.
hmm.
Like, I'm trying to put myself in that position with the butterflies, and I'm just like, now would I redo them? Well, I mean, no, because I have the tarot deck itself.
Mhm.
So there's no reason for me to redo the butterflies and something.
Right. Well, that's a cool thing about how you paced yourself too. So if you did make a mistake, it would just be with that one card that was in front of you because you'd already, completed the other one. So it wouldn't have been start the whole thing from the beginning. It would be more like the back stitching process or just
Right.
redoing a section. So,
I have
that's
a big fear because in order, when I was submitting to the publisher, right, they wanted a proposal and they wanted sample cards from each of the suits. And that was a challenge because, I have all the cards laid out in a design on the big tapestry. And so to jump around to the other suits meant jumping around all over my plan for the tapestry. And my big fear was that I would miscount by one stitch and the entire thing would just be not ruined, but it would be incredibly obvious that you were off by one stitch. And so it was like, they say measure twice, cut once. I measured like 5 times before I would do the stitches when I was doing that jumping around. And then that was always my big fear as I was filling in the rest of the tapestry was just like, okay, is this card gonna line up or was I off by one? And if I'm off by one, what do I do? But luckily I did not miscount and so everything lined up, but it was an incredibly nerve-wracking part of the process.
yes, for sure. There's so many different stages to art and with this particular type of art because if you don't have a good foundation and you don't know what you want to do and you don't have like that that initial sketch, like you're saying with the count in your head, then you can't get to the fun part, which is just like the flow. That
Right.
flow doesn't come right away. It's not like abstract art where you could just chill and like throw colors around. There's so much structure
Yeah.
with the textile art, and it's made me better at so many other things in my life because I'm like pinpointing like these teeny tiny, and it's now with these other aspects of my life, I can really zoom in and it's just it's made me more detail aware of things that other people miss because I you really do you're looking at like one pixel at a
And
time.
sometimes one pixel can throw off the entire thing.
Right.
I
Yeah,
think,
cross stitch is even more technical than embroidery, I think.
yeah, I think the biggest thing for me is just like, a little bit of pre-planning goes a long way.
Hmm. Absolutely. Yeah. But that's another part of the magic, if you think about the magical process, unless, there's some chaos magicians out there and they're just like, whatever. But there is an intention. There you have to think about it. You have to dream it. You have to imagine it. And then you're putting this time and devotion into it, but it always starts with that initial intention. And I think that does come in a lot with this type of work as well. And like that's what makes it feel so magical is because you set the intention and then you stayed the course to the end. And then you literally like made something that didn't exist with these tools that were just there, you know?
Yep.
Um, how do you approach tarot history and symbolism when weaving it into your work? And do you lean more into the traditional aspects, intuitive, or is it a combination of both?
I think it's a combination. I did do, a deep dive in tarot history and the symbolism and kind of, it was very, very interesting to learn, when some of these symbols came up in tarot, right? Because if you look at the Visconti Sforza tarot, it's very different than what we have today. And it was just kind of cool to see the evolution of tarot through the centuries. Um, but the problem with that is some things didn't translate to butterflies and cross stitch symbolism. So some of them did. Like if you look at the Eight of Cups, it's basically the Rider Waite Smith image. So some of them did translate, but others it was just like, okay, how do I um like the lovers card, right? How do I get two butterflies embracing? That's not going to work. Or the Eight of Swords, right? I can't put a little tiny blindfold on a butterfly. That's not going to show up. So how
Right.
to reinterpret that for something that would work for butterflies. Um, and then the Knight cards, right? It's just a shield with a butterfly on top of it. And I kind of did that on purpose because I wanted some cards where you know, everyone wants a guidebook for their tarot deck, but no one actually reads the guidebook like cover to cover. And people just look at the guidebook as, just a thing that, kind of like a dictionary, basically.
Mm.
But my main background was in writing. And so I wanted the guidebook to be a piece of writing that people wanted to read.
Hmm.
And so I intentionally, with the Knight cards, made that symbolism so vague that no matter how experienced a reader you are, you would look at it and be like, okay, I know what this card means, but how did she interpret it? And then they would open the guidebook and they would see this little story and they would be like, oh my God, this is a short story collection.
Yeah, that's so beautiful. I love how it's like the traditional aspects, but you are weaving in some of your own, interpretations of those cards. And I think sometimes we're so attached to like the Rider Waite Smith deck that it's hard to break free of that. But there's so many other beautiful tarot decks, and sometimes like I'll look at it and it's like a salamander and I'm like, oh, that does. That's not a night in my head, but then I'll read about it and I'm like, okay, okay, this is
Yeah.
awesome. Like,
There was this one deck, oh, I can't remember what it's called, but the death card was this just green meadow.
Mm.
And it was just like at the back, you could see the sun wasn't in the image, but the grass was glowing from what the sun would be. And that was always just like, that's a very interesting and unique take on death.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, I love seeing the different interpretations of the tarot, and I love the individual perspectives on the symbolism because these are like collective archetypal energies, but the way that we experience those energies might be really unique. So for some of us, death, when we think of it, doesn't always look like, a skeleton
Right.
riding a horse with a bunch of blood around him. It's like for some people, death is that passage. It
Right.
might be part of that, the road to awe or something. And so I think it's refreshing because sometimes if people are scared of like the Rider-Waite-Smith, I'm like, well, maybe get you something a little bit different because maybe sometimes those cards are so direct that
Yes.
getting you something more light and airy, we're still dealing with the same archetypal energies, but maybe some people don't want to see a dude laying there with a bunch of swords in his back. Maybe that's a little dramatic for them because it's so literal. Um,
Maybe they want
and
a bunch of butterflies instead.
right, and I love that. Like I love that you are giving us this other option, right? To view it from a more light and airy perspective. And I think it's supportive for people that might not fully register or be a little triggered by, some of
Yeah.
the artwork in the original one, which is I'm not gonna say my heart doesn't stop sometimes, when I pull certain cars, I'm like, ah, because it's so intense, some of the artwork there. But
I
with butterflies, I'm like, okay, I can look at the swords as like the mental component and not overthink about being stabbed 10 times. So yeah.
I I think that was definitely something I wanted to do with my tarot deck because a lot of times we turn to tarot when things are not going well in our lives.
Hmm.
And kind of the last thing we need when we're already going through a hard time is to have this abrasive energy, so to speak. When, it's like, yes, there is a time and a place for tarot to call you out.
Hmm.
We all do need a little bit of that in our lives, but also a lot of times we just need a big hug.
Hmm.
But that's what I wanted my deck to kind of give off that vibe where it's just like it's going to be okay.
Right. And it's like leaning towards more inspiration instead of just taking you to that one moment. Like I think of like the Three of Swords, and it's like it's triggering for people to see their, a heart being stabbed. Like, I mean, it's just like, but metaphorically, a lot of times it's a mental thing. It's not physical. And so I love how yours kind of takes it out of that, like taking it so literally as like physically getting your heart stabbed and more of like, how does that register symbolically as far as like our own development on the path or like where we're at right now? And I just think it's a beautiful thing and like it's definitely a necessary thing for many people who have, more of an affinity to that kind of art over some of the darker, symbolism.
Right. Well, thank you. I appreciate it. And I think there's, room and space for both kinds.
Hmm.
I just think sometimes, we don't we don't want or need the darker stuff. Just like sometimes, the lighter butterflies, that's not necessarily the best choice either. Although, of course, I always think the butterflies are the best choice, but
Right. Yeah, I find that I like to combine and use different decks for different types of personalities, depending on what the person is like. I had a person just recently and they were like, well, I don't know about the tarot. So I went more with the oracle because I'm like, well, she doesn't want that. She's already in a hard time. And I think she was scared of getting like the tower or something. And she's just like, could you? And I'm like, let's just go with some like unicorns and stuff today. And sometimes that's what you need, you know. You don't if you're already in something hard, you don't necessarily need to keep looking at it from that perspective. Sometimes having the other side of it. And the more you work with tarot, the more you realize that there's light and dark in all of them anyways. But it takes a while of living through some of the situations and like seeing how they actually played out for you to trust that it's not, that it's a lot of times it's metaphorical. It's like a more of a symbolic way of viewing life. It does like death doesn't mean you're gonna die. And that just like that takes some practice of like I didn't die when I pulled the death card. Like just to trust that, you know.
Well, and I think Hollywood has not helped in that
Hmm.
because it's like, guaranteed if you have a tarot reader in a Hollywood movie, she's going to pull the death card. And it's kind of like, actually the tower card would be more appropriate, but fine, whatever you want. So again, I think that's another reason why having a bunch of butterflies, because it's just like, look, see, tarot is not just the scary fortune teller saying you're going to die. It's also, you know, it can be light and happy.
Right. Right. And just like you were saying, so and so many of us, like I'm in Tennessee, so a lot of our listeners and people I know come from the Christian background. So they are feeling called to maybe explore some of these more metaphysical things, but like you, like it takes, it's like, well, like because that upbringing is there and if there's fear associated with it, it can take a while, you know. So approaching it through a lighter lens is sometimes necessary to get people to even feel comfortable enough to
Absolutely.
be open to these kind of things, to look at it as less evil. Like pulling the devil card. I mean, that's like
Right.
you're leaving Christianity, you immediately like see this horned, devil figure.
Like if you're first, if you walk into a metaphysical store, you see a devil just sitting right there, then you're like, aha, this is everything I was told is true.
Right. Yeah, so it's kind of nice, especially for those getting started, to have something that is reflecting, something beautiful, something and with butterflies they do naturally have awe and wonder within them. I think as children, it's like that's one of the first animals that we all just like pause and it's like, we want to go chase after them. We want to watch them, and there's just nothing scary or intimidating to me about a butterfly. It's just like so approachable. Um, and looking at life through the symbolism of a butterfly, I feel like it's easy to think that way. Where other animals trying to figure out, like I was like the salamander, like it took me a long time to figure that one out because I haven't spent a lot of time with salamanders, so I was like I don't know, or like the eel or something. But with butterflies, I think even a child could sit and appreciate that. And
I actually had a book signing and I had my big cross stitch on display or whatever. And this child did walk past and was like, butterflies. And, spent, a good like 10 minutes just looking at every single one of the butterflies. And I had some butterfly stickers and I gave them to the, kid or whatever. And the mom was just like, she kept thanking me. And then she also kept apologizing for all this time her child was taking. And I was just like, if anyone is upset that a child is looking at butterflies, like the problem is with them, not with the child.
right, yes, it's beautiful to have children appreciate your creations. And I think that might be another reason why I love doing like colorful stuff is because I'm like when kids come over to hang out with my children and they're like, "Oh my God, look at this Evie." And I'm like, "Yeah, isn't it cool?" So I don't know. There's just something beautiful about the childlike wonder that comes through and inspiring children to want to make art too. Some of the first things as a child that I drew was, well, of course, the sun,
Right,
flowers, butterflies. It's like the initiation into art is the simple things that we see in our everyday life. I see a butterfly pretty much. I live out in the country, so I see them every day. And every day it's still as inspiring as if I have never seen one before. Um, and it takes me back to childhood of just kind of, you have to be still. You try to creep up on them, but they're gonna
Right. And like when a butterfly lands on you, it's like, oh my God, this is like, I can't move. I just have to sit there and enjoy this moment of the butterfly just being on me.
right. Yes, I always feel like I'm winning somehow if a butterfly lands on me. Like I
And
have embodied stillness and love in this moment, and this butterfly thinks I'm a flower, and what a gift from the universe. Um, so we've kind of talked about how you have combined your own ability to, be a writer, be an author, and how that's affected a little bit with your interpretations of the cards. Let's talk a little bit about why you chose to include microfiction stories into your guidebook.
so, yeah, the guidebook was a process. I don't want to say like the cross stitch was easy, but it was kind of like, once I figured out how the cards were going to look, it was like I knew what I had to do with each card. But with the guidebook, I went through like three different versions. I started off with the standard guidebook and I hated it. I was just like, this is boring. I don't want to write this. No one's going to want to read this. Just whatever. Um, and of course, while I was working with the guidebook, I was also still struggling with the fact that, why am I the one to do this project? Who do I think I am? And why would the universe send me this vision of all people? It's like I can cross stitch, yes, but I had never like designed my own patterns before. Um, and so as I'm like trying to struggle with the guidebook, I'm also trying to struggle with my own self-confidence in doing the project. And as I'm struggling with the guidebook and I'm coming up, as I said, I went through like three different versions and I was just like, I hate them all. And finally I sat down and I was just like, okay, why don't I write something that I would like? It's like I have I have all this training, whatever. And so I wrote down and I wrote a little short story for the magician and I was like, that's why that was the moment it clicked because I was like, this is going to take your regular guidebook and it's going to turn it into a piece of writing that people will actually want to read, I hope.
Mhm.
um, but also by making this it turns the guidebook into a metaphor and an allegory, and instead of just like simply laying it out, it's going to make the reader actually pause and think, to come to their own interpretation, not just of the card artwork, but also the story and the guidebook and the meaning behind it. And I think a lot of times people struggle with learning tarot because it's like, how do I memorize 78 keywords? But we have a much easier time remembering stories. And so I thought, I was like, this will probably also be really helpful to a beginner when they're trying to learn the tarot. They're not necessarily thinking about the keywords that they have to memorize. They'll be like, oh, wait, this is the magician, and that's the story about that butterfly with the wand, and, so on and so forth. So that's my story of how I came up with the guidebook.
That's beautiful and definitely helpful because I struggled trying to memorize them all in the beginning too, like approaching it very concretely and just so like literally. But I am a person that reads a lot of fiction and I love mythology, and somehow I could read mythology and I'm like, yeah, this totally makes sense for like this phase of in life. But someone tries to like splurt out some really literal stuff to me and I'm like, but how does that relate symbolically? Like, it actually was when I sat down and tried to think of the cards in this sort of whole story mapped out, that it made more sense because I actually was thinking about the card that follows and the card that
Right.
comes before. And so if I draw the emperor, I don't disregard that the empress came first
Right.
because it's like this unfolding. But before I really sat down and looked at it as an the entire story of life that we move through. And sometimes we move through the cycle really fast and it might be a quick thing, but then sometimes it might be like symbolic for the whole life cycle. But
Mhm.
then there's like many cycles within it. And I finally clicked for me. I mean, I had probably been doing it for like 5 years before I was like, okay, I don't need to look at the book anymore because I'm finally integrating it as this story of life. We're going on this journey, and these are the energies that we're going to come across, whether
Mhm.
we're embodying it or seeing it in our outer world. These are some of the conflicts. This is some of the support. Here's your allies. Here's your gifts. We're all magical. Like we all have these abilities. And then I was like, okay, I get it. I can see the benefit without it just sitting there and just looking at 5 words. And for someone that's not creative, that's extra challenging because,
Right.
like, how do you weave those words into sentences to like make it relevant to the situation? And so I feel like it really takes this creative process to work with tarot.
Well, that's why
So
they say reading tarot is an art, not a science, because you can have, like, you and I could look at the same spread with the same decks and we could come to different interpretations.
mhm,
But I think that's part of what makes storytelling so powerful is the story is the same, but you with your own personal, you know, the things in your life that have shaped you and how you view things are different than what have shaped me. And so we will look at the same story and we will have different conclusions. And I think that that's the beautiful part about storytelling and about art as well.
mhm.
And so tarot is just another form of storytelling.
Yes, absolutely. My children have this little card game. It's just pictures. There's no words. It's just like it's like a witch, or it might be like a basket of fruit or whatever. And what you do is we all sit around and like you have to put the image down and you have to build on the story that the previous person was telling. And I'm like, this is such a gift, right? Like, I'm like, this helps so much because it really is just, okay, and then what comes next? And that is how I work with tarot is how does this story unfold? And you don't know what you're about to add to the next
I wonder
part
if
of the spread.
you could use that game as an oracle deck.
Well, I've kind of let my daughter, sometimes she is next to me and I have got her a unicorn deck because she's obsessed with unicorns and I'm like, "Here, this is your special one." But that one I will sometimes sit out and she'll kind of do it alongside me. And I'm like, "This is some base level, way to teach people not only the art of storytelling though, but how to be creative with these pivots because like you're like okay and then the witch goes into the woods but now you've got a flood that comes in and you're like okay I've got to stop for a minute and think about where we came from to get to this point and how would this flood impact this. But it's thinking of it all simply like that that really helped me kind of just look at it more playfully. It doesn't always have to be these big initiations and this, I mean, sometimes we do spreads and they absolutely are like big pivotal points. But then
Right.
sometimes, if you're pulling cards every day, it's you have that kind of lighthearted playfulness sometimes and thinking like, oh, well, yesterday we were in the Empress phase and today, we pulled the death card. So how does that add on to yesterday? And like it is this art of the story of that's unfolding in our reality with these archetypal characters. So I feel like we've kind of touched on this, but I feel like it's a good end kind of wrap up question. How do all of your creative outlets, tarot, cross stitch, and writing, inform and inspire one another?
So I think, storytelling and tarot, they're very closely interwoven. And sometimes, like, if I'm working on a book and I get really stuck, then I will just pull a tarot card. And it's like, maybe a new character comes in. Like, if I get one of the court cards, then it's like, oh, well, then I guess we're introducing a new character right now. Sometimes it'll be like, aha, I pulled the death card. Let's drop a body in there. Um, As far as the cross stitch, I think a lot of times, like when you're telling a story, you can, all the different threads can get all, wrapped up and tangled. And then so it's kind of like, okay, I need a few minutes to calm myself, center myself, and then think about where, as you said, where we've come, what's going on in this moment, and where we're going to take. And so cross stitch, I do a lot of thinking when I cross stitch. I teach online college English at home. And so, when I was working in the workplace, I would have this commute where I would do a lot of my plotting and my thinking and stuff like that. I did have a struggle once I no longer had that. So cross stitch kind of filled that void where it's like, okay, I can sit and chill and be calm. And it's not to say I don't have to focus on cross stitch, but I've been doing it a long time. And so then I can just kind of let my mind wander and think about my stories.
Oh, that's beautiful. I kind of look at it sometimes with stitching as this form of mindful meditation.
Yes.
And I tell people who are like, I struggle with meditation. I'm like, well, find something you can do where you kind of are able to zone out. And it's okay if you're moving. So for some people, that might be walking. For
Hmm.
some people, it might be peeling potatoes. That's a way that I'm totally not like focused on the potato, you know? Um, but sewing does that for me, because like once you've laid down the foundation, you can just, and then it's like meditation where at first there's all these thoughts and it's just like you're getting bombarded and you're like, oh my God, like this is a lot, but you keep going and it starts to, if you think about like all the tangled threads, like you start to kind of pull them apart and you're like, okay, this is making more sense now how I might solve that riddle or but I feel like by the end of my little session, it's like I have less of those thoughts. Like
Yeah.
they're more structured and organized and
And
I think that is the magic of
and I'm
sewing.
like really intense emotions as well. Um, I'm calm.
Hmm.
So it's just like if I was really upset, or even, when I'm like super happy and super excited and I can't sleep, then it's like, okay, I need to sit and cross stitch for a few minutes just to get me to the point where it's like, okay, now it's, 12:30 and I just need to get to sleep.
Right. Yeah, it absolutely can be therapeutic. And I always try to encourage people, to explore different art forms, but I'm like, it's really once you figure out like cross stitching or embroidery, like there's some technical things, but once you've mastered those, it really is so fun and just invigorating to have like free reign over this art form. But everyone's so different. Like I cannot crochet at this point in my life. I mean, maybe one day. But these people that I know, they're like, "Oh, I could never embroider." Like they're just crocheting these amazing things, and I'm like, it's the creative process it is spiritual. It is, it helps us on so many levels, like physically, I feel like it's good for just this coordination, like this mind-body connection, because you're having to use your hands, you're having to use your mind, and then you're working through like some of these spiritual aspects of life while you're doing it, and it's not always about the end result. I wish more people would not limit themselves from creative expression because they're like, I mean, I hear 90% of the time, I suck at art or I suck at like this
Right.
or that. And I'm like, but still, it's the process that makes it so beautiful. But,
Yeah.
it's hard.
It took me a long time in my cross stitching before I was able to make something like these butterflies. Like it wasn't
Mhm.
just I picked up a hoop and was like, aha, butterfly tarot.
Right.
Um,
Right.
but
Yeah.
I enjoy the process of cross stitching. And
Hmm.
like I have made so many things that I just give away to people and they're always just like, "Are you sure you want to give this to me?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I just wanted to make it. Like doesn't just because I make it doesn't mean I want it on my wall, but I know you
Right.
want it on your wall."
Yes. So if someone cross stitches me something or makes me something, that is like a cherished gift, because I know how much time went into it. And these days I have a hard time selling my work because I'm like, I would much rather make it as a gift for a friend than sell something that took me, 3 months to make for
Right.
$100. I mean, it's not really, the value isn't really about the money sometimes when it comes to it, because it's just, you're never, like, the way you've done it is awesome because you kind of do get this return without having to like individually make it over and over and over again. But, a lot of it is, it's hard to charge for it because it's like people don't fully understand the time that goes
Right.
into the art form. So,
Yeah, that's the tricky part with cross stitch and embroidery art or whatever, where it's just like if I how do I put a price on something that took me 21 months to make?
yeah.
And then it's just like if I did put that appropriate price on it, 2 years worth of work, if I look at, the job I have and how much I make in 2 years,
Mm-hmm.
no one is going to pay that for this.
Right.
No shade on me as an artist, or that's just reality. Um, and that's another reason I think, the cross stitching and tarot deck was a unique way to sort of return on that time investment, where
Yes.
selling the actual cross stitch, like this thing is hanging on my wall. When people
Mm-hmm.
walk into my home, they know exactly the home they are walking into, and if they have a problem they can turn around and walk out.
Yeah.
But just the fact that I am able to sell my cross stitch without selling my cross stitch.
Right. And that's a really creative thing that I hadn't fully considered. So it's cool to see people be creative with the different ways that they share their art. And they still get it out there into the world, but it's like you still get to keep it, because like there's so much of the art. I'm like, I love this frog, like I kind of made this for me, but um, so that is a really cool way to get your art shared and make some profit, and then also still get to love it and appreciate it yourself every day. So, for those listening, what's the best way to follow you, connect with your work, look into like future projects you're doing? How can our audience support you?
So I am pretty active on Instagram as Starla Yilmas Tarot. And there's a Facebook, Starla Yilmaz. I have a TikTok that I haven't posted anything in a while because, you never know when the government is just going to shut TikTok off. Um, but I also have a website, starlayilmaz.com. You can sign up for my newsletter there, and I will be sending out, periodic updates about the next project and things.
Awesome. Well, I look forward to seeing what you create in the future and saving up some money and buying this deck myself so I can actually work with it because it really is um, beautiful. And I've loved what I have gotten to see with your content as far as the individual cards. They're so stunning. So,
Yeah,
yeah, thank you for following that vision that you had.
yeah, you can buy the deck. You can order it through Barnes and Noble, Books a Million. It's on Amazon, of course. I know some local metaphysical shops in Atlanta are carrying it, but you should also be able to walk into pretty much any bookstore and be able to order it through them. So that's the one advantage to going through a publisher, is that you can pretty much just order it anywhere.
Well, thank you so much for taking the time to come on the show and share your beautiful creative energy with us.
I really appreciate you having me. It's been an honor.
Yes. And thank you all for tuning in. Check us out next time on the Astral Hour.